can go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our final installment of our Road to Kearney webinar series this afternoon. My name is Caroline Viola. I'm the recruiting assistant based out of our New York office. So before we kick this off, just wanted to go over a couple logistics for today, and then I'll pass it over to Ryan. So did just want to let you know that we will have time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. So if any questions come up that you'd like to have answered, you can go ahead and use that Q&A pod, which can be found at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And you can send your questions to Norbert Subcheck, who's listed as a panelist on this event. So in the event that we don't get to your questions by the end of the 45 minutes, you can send any of your questions to careers.mba@kearney.com, and we'll get them answered there. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Ryan.
Sorry, just getting off mute. Hey, everyone. Glad you could join us this afternoon. Kylie and I are going to take you through a bit of a mock case, give you some pointers and tips, and hopefully you can learn something and get ready for prepping for your upcoming, hopefully, interviews. So just jump on into the next one. So let's just pretend that Kylie and I just got into the interview. We probably exchanged a couple, hey, how are yous? And, I guess that's kind of where we jump in. So, thanks, Kylie, for joining me today, making time out of your day. Love to jump into this case with you.
Yeah, Ryan, thanks. I'm excited to be here and excited to jump into this case.
All right. So I'm going to read you the prompt and then we can kind of get into it. Sound good?
Sounds great.
All right. So your client is Local Roasters. It's a coffee shop located near Ross Business School in Ann Arbor, Michigan. It's a little chilly up there now as it starts to turn to winter, but they've been the largest shop around, sales based and volume, based on cups of coffee and coffee beans. But recently there was an E. coli breakout in the cafeteria. Especially on Ross's Caf. So it's been closed for a bit, but Local Roasters, who our client is, has been seeing the profit decline despite this new market of people that's recently available because of that. So it's a historical landmark, and we're pretty concerned. They're pretty concerned about their profitability, and they've brought you in to help them understand their current situation and really want to focus on two things. One, what's the main driver of their poor profitability? And two, what are the steps to get them back on track?
All right, so great. So before we actually get started, I took a couple notes, as you can kind of see here on my screen. Just kind of walk you through what I've got for my notes here. I'll read them out loud as it's probably hard to see my page. So Local Roasters is a coffee shop in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and they are facing declining profitability. And since the closing of the cafeteria on campus at the local business school, Local Roasters wants to understand main drivers of the profitability issue and determine strategies to mitigate this issue. Is that correct?
Yeah, you got it.
All right, so I'll kind of start that on the top of my page. I'm going to keep focus there. If you don't mind, could I ask 4 clarifying questions before we dive into this?
Sure.
Yeah, so my first question that I'm worried about is, is Local Roasters the only coffee shop in town? I want to know if there's, anything else popping up that could be leading to that profitability. Also looking to know, have any new coffee shops or other potential competitors opened up shops in the town? Thirdly, I'd like to know, is there any information on the product portfolio for Local Roasters? And then the fourth thing I'm thinking through is there any information that I could use on profitability or revenues of Local Roasters?
Okay. So do you want to jump into those one by one, or how are you thinking about that?
Let's do it one by one. I just wanted to give you a high-level thought process of where we could start, and then we can go from there to talk about our framework.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, so first question, is Local Roasters the only coffee shop in town?
Yeah, so they're not the only, but they are the largest, and there's been no new entrants recently. So they're still competitive within the market, but largest.
All right, no new entrants. That helps me with my second piece there that I wanted to think through as well. What about the information on their product portfolio? What are they actually selling specifically?
Yeah, so they focus on coffee, smoothies, and sandwiches.
Coffee, smoothies, sandwiches. Okay, good to know. And before we get jumped into this, do you think that there is anything that I have not covered? I got to look at the outside sources. Before I jump into the inside sources, I'll take a little time to gather my thoughts. But anything else, any information that you want to give to me?
No, I think that's about it for right now.
Okay. So if you don't mind, I'd like to take a few seconds to just sit back and think through my thoughts and kind of come up with a framework of how we can go about solving this profitability case.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you. Okay. So as I think through this problem, it's a profitability problem. And to get to a core profitability problem, we're either looking at something that's a revenue driver or a cost driver, as revenue minus cost equal your profitability. So I would like to take a second to go down both of those paths, probably starting on the revenue side and understanding how the revenue is generated for local roasters. So the very first thing that I'd like to kind of check on is, for the revenue side, what are the prices for the three items that you gave me: coffee, smoothies, and sandwiches?
Okay, yep. Coffee's $3, smoothies are $5, and sandwiches are $8.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. And I think that from the revenue side, as I look at this, you could easily go into thinking of it as sales price, and also looking at the amount sold of those items, or we could just look at it from a cost of goods sold and determine a gross margin. So do you either have the amount sold or a cost of goods sold?
Yep, I have COGS for you for sure. So coffee is 60 cents, smoothies are $2, and sandwiches are $6.80.
Okay, good. Okay. So just from the information that you've just given me there, being able to see that the coffee is sold for $3, and we've got a COGS of 60 cents, that's $2.40 remaining. That is our margin, and that $2.40 of that $3 is 80% margin. So we've got an 80% margin on coffee, and if you do the same thing for smoothies, knowing that the sales price is $5 and the COGS are $2, you've got a 60% margin on smoothies, and on sandwiches you've got $6.80 and $8, so $1.20. So you've got about 15% margin on those as well.
I guess so. I'm curious. So those are some good calcs and good information to have. I guess what's your initial thoughts on that?
My initial thoughts on that is that if we have the gross margin on the products, then we can start to look at, what the sales were like before and after this E. coli outbreak, because I think that might be a very big factor in where our declining profitability is going. So to start off, I know I wanted to look at, what's the core drivers of our profitability, and we've looked at it from a revenue side so far, and we can get to costs as well. But I think what I'm really shaping up on is being able to determine if this E. coli breakout has had an effect on revenue first.
Okay. So what are you thinking? You want to know what information are you thinking about?
Yeah, I think what would be helpful is to understand the change in sales before the E. coli breakout and then after the E. coli breakout.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So before and after, so the mix changed a bit. So if we look at coffee, and just everybody listening, and probably just read this rather than display it, but coffee went down 1,500 units, smoothies went up 3,850. Let me bring that back, thanks. And then sandwiches went up 7,500.
Perfect. Okay. And I think the best way to go about looking at that is, so if you could talk to me about the specifics before and after, we could go into the details on this, but the 1,500 from coffee, the 3,850 from smoothies, and the 7,500 from sandwiches. Could you give me the after outbreak numbers on those?
Oh, yeah. So 16,500 on coffee, 22,450 on smoothies, and sandwiches were 13,500.
All right, perfect. The reason I asked that is because that'll give me, now that I have the change and the after, that'll help me be able to determine the before outbreak numbers, and then from there be able to talk about what sales were before the outbreak and what the gross margin was before the outbreak, and then talk about sales and gross margin after the outbreak.
Gotcha. Okay. Sounds good.
Okay. So walking through this in my head now, if we look at the gross margin for coffee, we said that gross margin was about 80% of a price of $3. So that's about $2.40 for the gross margin of coffee. And we said that the sales for after the outbreak was 16,500, and that the change from before is about 1,500, meaning that 18,000 was the sales before the outbreak. So it looks like our gross margin before the outbreak on coffee, when you take the 18,000 and multiply it by $2.40, 18 multiplied by 2 will give you 36. 36, half of 18 is 9,000, so 8% of 9,000. So you've got 43,200 is your gross margin before the outbreak of coffee. If you take that same formula for smoothies and sandwiches, looking at the margin and then multiplying or subtracting the change from the original, it would get you about 18,900 as a gross margin before the outbreak on smoothies. And if you do the same thing for sandwiches, that'll give you a gross margin of about 7,200 for the sandwiches as well. And when you add all three of those up, what you have is you've got 69,300 is going to be your gross margin before the outbreak.
Yeah. Okay. So we got 69,000 beforehand, and then I think you said you were talking about looking at what it was after.
Yeah. The most important thing now is that we do the same types of calculations to be able to find out what the gross margins were or the gross profit was after the E. coli break. So I can either do this math in my head really quickly, or I can walk you through, but I'm going to do the same thing for coffee, which is going to be $2.40 again, multiplied by 16,500. 16 times 2, 32, 33, 500 times 2, 49, so 39 plus the 600. So we've got 39,600 on coffee. Smoothies, we have $3. $3 multiplied by 2,450. $3 times 2,450 is 7,350. And then sandwiches at $1.20 multiplied by 13,500 would get you 16,200. Add all together, 9, 11, 5, 1, 47, 8, 60, $63,150 is your gross profit after the E. coli breakout, meaning that your change in profit went down from 69,300 to 63,150.
Right.
Okay, so I think that after kind of looking at the gross profit from before and the gross profit after, I think that we are able to assume correctly that the E. coli outbreak really did have an influence on our profitability, specifically as we see the coffee profitability go down by about 4,000, the smoothie, which is about 10% decrease. The smoothie decrease cut in half from 18,000 to about 7,000. And the sandwich is actually up, almost doubling from 7,000, or more than doubling, up from 7,000 to 16,000. So one of the things that I think we have to look at are our costs and what could be a reason for these for this profit margin to actually be going up and down based on the different products.
Yeah. Well, I think we looked at it from the volume perspective, right? So we know sandwiches were up with a lower margin. And
Yeah.
that was partly what was driving it. So I think if we look at our total profitability, you probably want to look at the fixed costs, right? So
Yeah.
If you think about our fixed costs that are non-food related, could you help me think through what those might be so we can brainstorm them and then come to the numbers there?
Yeah, that's a good piece. I noticed in my notes earlier, I didn't write down if Local Roasters was actually a standstill facility or if they were a food truck or not, to start thinking about the rent that they've got to pay. Are they a facility that stands still, or are they moving around?
Yeah, so they're a facility. They are a building. They're brick and mortar on campus. Yeah, exactly.
And what's their rent?
$2,500 a month.
Okay, $2,500 a month. That makes sense. That fixed cost is probably going to stay the same because it's brick and mortar.
Yeah.
What about some of their employees with these $8 sandwiches? They got to have some pretty high quality things that they're putting in it for these Ann Arbor residents. But they've got a lot of people, it seems like, making these sandwiches now. Has their labor before and after changed? Could you give me the before and after on labor?
Yeah, so it went from about $5,000 up to $14,000 before and after. Those sandwiches, I think you hit the nail on the head there, is a little bit more complex, required some more time with the increase in volume. It's a good insight.
Yeah, that increase in volume definitely had a major role, and that's something we'll come back on. I think there's two other areas where I want to double check that might not be as much, but we'll double check. The utilities that they're paying in this brick and mortar facility, that's more of a variable. What's the utilities looking like?
It was $900 before and $1,700 after. So the panini presses going into overdrive really drove up the electrical cost this month. In those 2 weeks.
Panini presses, I tell you, they'll do it to you. They will do it to you. And how do we market? Do we have any marketing dollars going out to Ann Arbor local students?
Yeah, the owner spent $1,800 on marketing and before and $4,000 after. I'm not sure the driver there, but it was just part of his ongoing costs. Just decided to up the marketing then.
That is interesting. That's something I'll definitely come back to because that's got to be an interesting piece there. But it looks like our total costs here have really gone up from about 10,000.
Yeah, roughly. 10,
yeah, about 10,000 all the way up to about 22,000. So rounding those numbers, that's still an increase of a lot.
Yeah, it's quite significant. So I guess if you could help me, I'd love to calculate the net profit before and after, and then start thinking about how we're going to solution that in the future.
Okay. So as we go into solutioning the net profit, I think if you wouldn't mind just giving me a moment here, I'll let some of our watcher owners be able to join and think through solutions as well and be able to do their math. And then we can even open it up, if you don't mind, for, if anyone is able to talk through the math.
That's good. Yeah. Give the profitability numbers for me. Yep, sounds good.
Yep. I've got the profitability for you. So when we look at our profitability, it looks like before the E. coli outbreak, we were seeing profitability of about 59,000. And after the E. coli, we've seen a profitability of about 41,000. So a decrease in our profit of about $18,000. And I think there could be multiple reasons why the sales volume for Smoothies has decreased during the E. coli outbreak. We could be looking at sandwiches are becoming popular without the cafeteria. We could be looking at the students are just more into getting some fullness in the colder weather that we've been dealing with. And we are seeing that decline in coffee as mentioned. And there's something that I think we can look into for the future there. But there's a lot of drivers that I would love to kind of dive into to talk about this poor profitability over the last 2 weeks.
Okay. So sounds good.
Okay. So I'll talk to you about two of the main ones, and then we'll table a third one that I'm thinking through, but I think we can definitely address the first two. The first driver that I'd really like to look into is the low margin on the sandwiches and the increased volume due to closing of the cafeteria. I think that's causing a lot of the poor profitability. And the second piece is increased volume in sandwiches. And I think that's what's kind of cannibalizing our smoothie sales. And that's got to be a big problem for us with that 6% margin.
Yeah, especially, the margin's much higher on those. So I guess I'm curious if we could come up with some potential solutions together, and if you could think through some of those and what are the steps the company could take to address these moving forward.
Yeah, of course. I think one of the things we've got to look at is if the prices on the items are flexible or not. We would definitely go in talking to the owner a little bit about the prices. I think the biggest thing that's the easiest fix is the cost. We definitely could be talking about how to lower the cost of the labor that we're seeing. Maybe, less people making sandwiches earlier in the day. Several different options you can look at for that labor cost. And even some of the other, the utilities may be a little lower if you're using the paninis in a more efficient way, those panini presses. I'd also like to explore the justification about that marketing cost that you told me about earlier. That was a piece that we don't have the answer to maybe, but I want to dive in a little bit deeper on that later. And then one of the things I'd like to also recommend as a revenue driver as well is not just being able to sometimes look at your raising prices, but how do you promotion and bundle? How are we marketing things? Do we have a process where we can provide, let's call it a buy 10, get your 11th free promotion in terms of coffee, or buy 2 coffees and get 1 sandwich free. That might be interesting as well. Looking at also bundling. I'm not sure when our highest peak hours for sales are, but looking into that and seeing some trend analysis on sales, whether they come in the morning or afternoon, and if we could bundle some breakfast deals or lunch deals is another option that I'd like to look at. But those are just some of the ideas that I would start with.
Sounds good. No, I think those are great solutions. I think we uncovered the profitability issue, and we can definitely bring those to the business owner and help them get back on track. So, yeah, thanks for working through that with me.
Thanks a lot, Ryan. This was great, and I appreciate you taking the time to give me information.
Great. Thank you both. So we have time for Q&A right now. So keep sending in your questions to Norbert, and then we'll go through a couple questions. And then we also have some tips for you as you go through your interview process as well. So first tip, do you have any tips for coming up with clarifying questions for interviewer after you go over the prompt? How open-ended can these questions be?
I think and Kylie, you build on this, but I think my biggest thing is make sure that it's just you're not diving too much into solutioning already. Just getting an understanding of the facts is probably where you want to be. You can be a touch open-ended, but I would be more targeted in these questions to get just clarity that you need to help set up your structure to walk through the case. But Kylie, you add whatever your thoughts are here.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the easiest things to do is either not take the time to think through a structure. Therefore, skipping the clarifying questions is what I often see as a mistake. And another thing that I often see is, solving the problem too early and getting into those. There's a balance to it. I never know when I'm actually on the other side and doing a case how far I want to go, but there is a balance to it. I would say if you're getting into questions that get into getting data or too many numbers, you're probably going too far in getting information. If you haven't asked any questions at all, that's probably not a good sign either. That's how I'd say play in the middle between those.
Great, thank you. And then we had quite a few people ask this next question regarding case content. Would it be okay to focus on the change in gross margin rather than calculating the before and after?
Yeah, I mean, you can do it, so I guess in my experience, I usually have a similar case and I've seen it solved a bunch of different ways. So you can set up what works for you. This is just how we had done it in this one, just to walk you through some of the steps. But as long as you explain how your thought process to the interviewer, I'm open to it for sure.
Yeah, I agree. The case interview should feel more like a conversation, not like you're trying to solve the problem. I would actually recommend that you don't think about how do I get the right answer, but more about how do I think through my process of thought and make sure that the interviewer knows my thought. The reason why I went through it that way is that's literally how I thought through the problem. And I came back to it. Originally, I was asking for something, and you might have saw this. I was asking for something one way, and I got an answer that was different. So I went back to make sure he understood how I was thinking through to make sure I got it in the way that I was thinking. So you might have to do that. You might have to circle back and ask something in a different way.
Great, thank you. Are you expected to share your work via video? And if so, any tips on doing that?
I think that's really tough. I've done these interviews for years now, and now that it's virtual, it's so hard sometimes for people to even have good internet. And so you won't be able to see what's on the paper. So you really have to do a good job of talking through what you're writing down and verbalize what you're thinking. I think that's the best way. What I like to do in the very beginning is kind of just show that I'm taking the notes and that I've thought through the problem, and make sure if I am trying to show the screen, I say, like, I'll put my problem at the very start here, boxed it at the top, and put a star by it. But I just would rather repeat the information I've heard and what I'm thinking than show the work on the screen. That's just a little hard to do.
Yeah, and Kylie's small on this screen, but when you do the interview, you'll take up the whole screen. I think I saw in the comments there was a question if these will be on the screen. Typically, we don't have too many visuals. I mean, there might be some people might do them, but for the most part, we will typically verbally give the information, so you'll have a bigger screen to work with and be able to see. But yeah, it's quite challenging because I've done virtual interviews for a few years now, and it's not as easy as just flipping it around and showing the person on the other side of the table. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'm often like, gotta go to the glasses for this one. What are you showing me there? Like,
yeah.
Can't see, but.
Great. And then can you both suggest how much time we should be spending on each part of the case?
It's so unique. It depends. There's a real consultant answer for you. It really depends. It's whatever you need to do for it. I think, sometimes you'll get all the way through it. Sometimes you won't. Some are trickier than others. I think it's more about showing your thought process, delivering insights. I think that was really important. Kylie came back with a few of those this time. I prompted for a couple, but, really like to see the candidate being proactive with sharing, like, not just, 2 + 2 = 4. It's like, what does that 4 mean in context? And Kylie, helped me deliver that message, which I think is really important. So I think those are the more important things I'd worry about rather than timing. But that's
once again, case interviewing is a conversation. So you shouldn't necessarily be thinking about how long do I talk about this? How long do I talk about this? More feel it through. It's more art than science. And when you get more into the art of it than the science of it, that's when you're at your best. And the timing thing, let your interviewer kind of guide you. I always feel that a lot of our interviewers are trained to start off, really coaching you and providing you the right guidance in a case. And they'll direct you in a case if you need to move on or not. If you hear keywords like, and what else do you think about this? Keep explaining. If you hear things like, okay, so yeah, let's go in that direction. Okay, it's time to move on. We're going down that direction. It's about listening in a conversation. So listen, and you'll be able to catch those keys to what's next.
I think that's a great
call.
Yeah, I think that's really good.
Yeah, so going into a little bit more detail, Ryan, could you share what Kylie did well specifically and what he could improve on?
I started to mention it. I thought that he was really good with his math calculations were really solid. Not just like the calculations themselves, but laying out how he was doing them, what he was going about, helping me think, see his thought process, driving through the case himself rather than me needing to say, do this, do that. Like, he really drove it himself. I think all of those were good, delivering the insights. And I think he was just generally pleasant, right? He's obviously seems like a very nice guy. I met him a few times at the firm, but not too much. But I think that's positive. Don't stress out too much. Be in the moment and enjoy the part of the process. So I thought that was really good, right? Bringing in some of his outside thoughts and, oh yeah, it's cold in Ann Arbor. People are filling up on sandwiches. That makes it more fun for us, right? If you just hear the same thing, oh yeah, people are eating more sandwiches. That's not as fun. So I thought that was really good. And I think, I don't know. It's not fair. We're EB for even better ifs. So it's tough because we.
Even better ifs.
Just continuing to deliver those insights, right? I think that's pretty much what it is. So.
All right. If we were going to be critical here about my own, let me look at my notes here. 2 EBIs, major EBIs for me. I tripped up in the middle a little bit with explaining what I wanted to do with the profitability. I think that there was a little bit of guidance on, okay, what do we do next now that we've got the profitability? Naturally, my thoughts should have taken me to explain what should have been next there. I wrote down a couple notes on my math things that I was like going really slow on. But I think what helps a lot of times with your math is talking through how you do math sometimes helps people. But I shouldn't always kind of like verbalize the math I'm doing in my head. I go between actually talking out loud and remember that conversation. And in virtual, you can't have conversations with yourself because it's a little bit more awkward. So I'd say, in my own even better ifs for myself, those are the two major ones that I would say I was thinking through as they were happening during the interview.
You're being critical. I think you're fine.
So one final question, then we'll go into some interview tips. So I see from the initial framework brainstorming, Kylie took about 30 seconds. We've seen that portion's taking as long as a minute and a half. Any thoughts how long that initial brainstorming should take?
That's a good range. That's fine. Couple minutes.
I would say it depends on the type of case also. This is a profitability case. Like, I don't need you to dive 90 seconds deep into revenue and cost. You should be able to know that we're going revenue or cost drivers pretty quickly. If you were doing like market sizing or anything like that, maybe I could see going a little bit closer to 60 seconds, but you don't have to have all your answers ready when you take this time. Once again, think through it as a conversation. What's the outline of the conversation I want to have, and then get into it. So no more than 60, 70 seconds, because once again, it gets awkward in a conversation to just be sitting there. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Bothers me less. So another consulting answer. It depends. It's fine. So it's really, I think that's what Kylie said.
It always depends, right?
Yeah.
It always depends.
If somebody really wants to have a robust framework, sure, fine, whatever. I'm not, but if you're getting, here's the thing. It's like Kylie said, if you're getting the hints, if somebody's like, okay, you ready to share this with me, then it's probably time to wrap it up. So, so that's probably a fair assessment. But yeah, I think what Kylie said is fair.
Perfect. So then we just have some next tips for the interview. So if either one of you want to go through this, I'll change the slide. Want to just add to anything with these as well?
Yeah, go ahead, Kylie.
Okay. So I put it like this. Case interviewing is truly a good skills test on what you're going to do as a consultant. On a daily basis, I'm working with my clients. They're giving me problems. They're giving me data, and I'm trying to help them solve what they're giving me. And that's why I say you have to condition yourself to taking it as a conversation. It's about problem solving. Show that you have the problem solving skills and the ability to just naturally think through things quickly, but also show your personality. I think one of the things that is going to be the best interview that I'm in is when I see that someone's excited to do this. If, I'm in an interview, and I've been in an interview before where someone was just like, they look scared or just threatened by solving problems, I'm kind of worried, because I'm like, this is the face you're going to have in front of clients, and this is your daily job now. So if I was going to be thinking through the skills that you're going to need here, it's going to be able to think on your feet, being flexible, and being engaged and open to solving these problems. And then maybe, in some of the pieces, you can talk through how, you're driving the analytical rigor. You can talk through how you can bring some insight and some jokes here and there, about it being cold in Ann Arbor, and even some personality and some creativity. I was thinking through my history of, my experience with coffee shops, and I don't drink coffee. So how do you naturally market to someone who doesn't drink coffee? You can add those insights to help you get through some of this.
Great. And then we also just have some tips for, best virtual interviewing practices. So just make sure your username is professional. Find private space for any unwanted interruptions. Also dress professionally. Skype interviews are a thing right now, but just make sure you wear the appropriate clothing for, like you would for an in-person interview. And then also technology issues happen, so just make sure you join early enough to make sure that there are any issues. And then also maintain eye contact as well. It's a little different, obviously, doing it via video, but just make sure you're looking at the camera rather than just staring at your screen as you're trying to make as best of eye contact as you can during a virtual setting.
Yeah, all good tips. Just treat it like it's in person.
Yeah, I wanted the job so bad. I wore my Kearney Patagonia that I had made. So that's just how bad I wanted the job, Ryan.
And then another thing to note as well, just make sure you also have an appropriate background, good lighting. I saw someone send in a question about that. Someone made note that Kylie has all the fun stuff in his background while Ryan has a white screen. So just make sure you have an appropriate background, whatever really works for you. And then if either one of you just want to talk about taking notes during the case interview, I think we can wrap up shortly.
Yeah, I think, this one lent itself to having the 3 product categories, and then you can have all your information in a table. Anytime you can put things in table, do it. Keep your one structure page separate. Try, if you need to cross avenues off or something like that, that's fine, but try to keep that one clean, I think would be my suggestion. And, scratch paper. It's, I think that's it.
Multiple pens, multiple pieces of paper, a cup of water. Like, these are things that will naturally help you in, I think, a virtual environment anywhere. But when you're interviewing, plan on things that could go wrong. I always normally have my laptop here and I have it plugged in. I've seen people who've not had their laptop plugged in. Like, that's another thing, just as like tips. I know I didn't mention them before, but I wanted to mention them now.
And don't try to use the calculator on the computer. We can talk through something.
That was so awkward. I had someone bring up a real live calculator on their phone and started using it. And I was just like, I can see you.
Another thing to note too with background, just saw another message come through. With WebEx or Teams, there is the option to use the digital background, so you can use those as well if you don't like the background that you have right now. But that wraps up our presentation today. Thank you so much for joining in, panelists. We appreciate you taking the time to assist us on this Friday. This was recorded, so if you would like to go through and practice this again, it will be posted on our Kearney website in the next week, most likely by Monday. But definitely go ahead and use those for practice. But again, thank you so much. We wish you all the best as you go through your interview process this season, and have a great weekend.
Good luck, everyone. Thanks.
Good luck.